You should have let my mother die with her secret.
Then why was she so afraid you'd find this?
You should have let my mother die with her secret. Peter Hahn's voice was low enough that only Evelyn Brooks could hear it, but the fury behind the words carried across the parking garage. Evelyn stood beside a silver sedan with a brass key pressed into her palm and a DNA report folded inside her coat. Across the concrete aisle, Michael Hahn stared at his younger brother as though he had never seen him clearly until that moment. Minutes earlier, the woman who had claimed to be their sister had fled the testing room in tears after DNA proved she was not. And somewhere beyond the glass towers of Manhattan, the real daughter of Sun Hee Han still did not know that a dying mother had spent decades searching for her. Evelyn had already been accused of theft, dismissed from the Han estate, and warned that her nursing career could be ruined. Now she understood something worse. The false daughter had not been a mistake. Someone had wanted the search to end with a humiliation. The question was no longer whether Sun Hee Han had hidden a daughter from her billionaire sons. The question was what one of those sons was willing to destroy to make certain that daughter was never found. If that question has your attention, stay with this story, because every answer will expose a deeper betrayal inside the Han family. And as the truth moves from a quiet bedroom to a public reckoning, the woman everyone treated as hired help will become impossible to silence. If you enjoy stories about family, dignity, loyalty, betrayal, justice, and second chances, subscribe and turn on notifications for more each week. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from today, whether it is a city, a state, or somewhere far beyond the United States. To understand why Evelyn was standing in that parking garage, we need to return about 2 weeks earlier, to a rain-soaked evening in Greenwich, Connecticut. The Han estate sat behind iron gates and old maples, large enough to resemble a private hotel, but quiet enough to feel abandoned. Evelyn Brooks, a 53-year-old Black American private-duty nurse, arrived at 7:15 with one overnight bag, a leather nursing case, and 30 years of practiced calm. At 53, she had learned that wealthy families often confused privacy with secrecy, and control with care. She had also learned not to judge a patient by the relatives waiting outside the bedroom door. Sun Hee Han was 79, terminally ill, physically weakened, and reportedly becoming confused during the late afternoon and evening. The agency notes described a difficult patient who had dismissed 4 private nurses in less than 3 weeks. Evelyn read the notes twice before entering, then deliberately left them closed on the hall table. She preferred to meet the person before meeting everyone else's opinion of the person. Inside the bedroom, Sun Hee sat upright against cream pillows, her silver hair neatly pinned and her eyes sharper than the chart had suggested. "You are the 5th one," Sun Hee said before Evelyn could introduce herself. "So I have been told." Evelyn placed her case on a chair. "Would you like me to leave before dinner or after?" For the first time, the older woman smiled. "You are not frightened of being fired?" "I am frightened of giving bad care. Employment is easier to replace." Sun Hee studied her for several seconds, then pointed toward the curtains. "Open those. Everyone keeps trying to turn this room into a funeral." Evelyn opened them, revealing wet trees, gray sky, and the distant lights of Long Island Sound. When she turned back, a man in a charcoal suit was standing in the doorway without having knocked. Michael Hahn was 57, tall, composed, and known publicly as the Korean-American billionaire chairman of Han Meridian Group. In person, Evelyn noticed something the business magazines never photographed. Exhaustion sat behind his stillness. "My mother needs rest," he said. She asked for the curtains open. Michael looked at Sun Hee. "Mother, I also asked your brother to stop rearranging my life, but apparently requests are respected selectively in this house." Michael's jaw tightened, though he did not argue. He introduced himself, explained that the family expected discretion, and said a driver would be available whenever Evelyn needed transportation. Evelyn thanked him, then asked the question that mattered more. "Who makes medical decisions when your mother is able to speak for herself?" Michael paused. "She does. Good." Sun-hee closed her eyes, not from fatigue, but satisfaction. That first evening passed without drama, yet Evelyn noticed 3 things she quietly recorded in her private nursing notes. Sun-hee's memory was strong when she was rested. Her humor was precise, and her confusion seemed to appear after certain medication periods. The pattern did not prove wrongdoing, and Evelyn refused to draw conclusions before she had evidence. But it did tell her that confused was too simple a word for what she was seeing. The next morning, Peter Han arrived carrying flowers that still had the florist's plastic around them. At 52, he was warmer than Michael in public, and somehow more impatient in private. He kissed his mother's cheek, placed the flowers where she could not see them, and immediately asked whether she had signed the legacy trust papers. Sun-hee's expression changed. "I told you I will discuss that with Elaine." Peter glanced at Evelyn. "This is family business." "Then discuss it when your mother wants family business." Evelyn replied. Peter gave her a smile that contained no amusement. "You must be the new nurse." "For the moment." Sun-hee laughed softly. Peter's smile disappeared. After he left, Sun-hee stared at the doorway for a long time. Then she asked Evelyn to lock the bedroom door. Evelyn did not move immediately. "Are you afraid of someone coming in?" "I am afraid of people deciding that a dying woman has already stopped being a person." That answer stayed with Evelyn. She locked the door, then returned to the bed without asking for the secret Sun-hee clearly wanted to tell. The older woman reached beneath her pillow and removed a photograph protected inside a yellowed plastic sleeve. It showed a young Korean woman holding a newborn outside a brick church, both faces washed by summer sunlight. Evelyn recognized Sun-hee immediately, though the photograph had been taken nearly 6 decades earlier. "The baby is my daughter," Sun-hee said. Evelyn looked from the photograph to the woman in the bed. "I thought Michael and Peter were your only children." "So do they." Rain clicked softly against the window as Sun-hee explained only the part she was ready to explain. She had been 21, unmarried, frightened, and living under the authority of a father who cared more about reputation than mercy. The baby was placed for adoption before Sun-hee married the man who later became Michael and Peter's father. Her husband learned about the child years afterward and made it clear that searching would destroy their marriage and damage his rising business. Sun-hee obeyed longer than she could forgive herself for obeying. Her birth name was Anna So, she whispered. "I do not know the name she has now." Then she added, "Silence can punish a person for a lifetime." "I learned that too late." Evelyn asked the obvious question carefully. "Why are you telling me Sun-hee reached for her wrist with surprising strength?" "Because somebody has been inside my desk." A cold quiet settled over the room. Sun-hee said a bundle of old letters had disappeared 3 days before Evelyn arrived. Only 2 people in the family knew where that desk key was usually kept: Michael and Peter. "I do not know which son took them," she said, "and I no longer have time to pretend uncertainty is the same as trust." Evelyn felt the boundary between nursing and family mystery rising directly in front of her. "I can protect your privacy and document your wishes, but I am not a private investigator. I am not asking you to investigate my sons." Sun-hee opened her hand and revealed a small brass key tied to a faded blue ribbon. "I am asking you to find my daughter before my sons do." The words were so quiet that Evelyn initially thought she had misunderstood. Sun-hee pressed the key into her palm. "If I die before I explain, Elaine Park will know what this opens." Elaine Park was the family's longtime attorney, a 66-year-old woman who had represented Sun-hee personally before she represented Han Meridian. Evelyn closed her fingers around the key but did not pocket it. Does Elaine know you are giving this to me? She knows I plan to give it to someone I trusted. That is not the same thing. No, son, he admitted. It is not. Evelyn placed the key on the bedside table instead of taking it. If you want me involved, we do this with another responsible person present. I will not become the secret nobody can verify. Soon he stared at her, then nodded slowly. That afternoon, Elaine arrived in a navy coat with a legal folder tucked under one arm. She listened without interruption as Sun Hee repeated the story of the daughter. Then Elaine surprised Evelyn by looking frightened rather than shocked. "You should have told me the letters were missing," she said. "I am telling you now." Elaine asked Evelyn to describe Sun Hee's mental condition in her own professional terms. Evelyn chose every word carefully. She is tired, physically fragile, and occasionally disoriented after medication. Right now, she is lucid and understands this conversation. Elaine nodded and took contemporaneous notes. Sun Hee then stated, in plain language, that she wanted Evelyn to hold the key until Elaine instructed otherwise. Only after that did Evelyn accept that the arrangement should have made the situation safer. Instead, it appeared to have told someone inside the house that Sun Hee's secret was moving beyond her bedroom. The following evening, Michael found Evelyn in the kitchen, reviewing the medication log. He was without his suit jacket, his tie loosened, and for the first time he looked more like a son than a chairman. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Your mother is dying," Evelyn said gently. "But dying and losing the ability to decide are not the same thing." Michael looked toward the hallway. "Peter says she has been making strange accusations. Has he told you what they are?" "He says she thinks someone is stealing from her." Evelyn did not reveal the missing letters. Instead, she said, "When she is confused, I document it. When she is clear, I document that too." Michael gave her a long, measuring look. "You do not seem easily influenced. That makes wealthy families nervous." A small smile almost reached his face. Before he could answer, something shattered upstairs. Evelyn reached Sun Hee's room first and found a water glass broken beside the bed. Sun Hee was awake but badly disoriented, repeatedly asking why her father had taken the baby. Peter stood beside the medication cabinet, insisting this was exactly what he had been warning everyone about. Evelyn checked the log, then the organized medication packets prepared for that evening. One packet had been opened earlier than scheduled. She did not accuse anyone. She simply photographed the packet, documented the time, and called the supervising physician as required. Peter watched every movement. "You are treating this like evidence," he said. "I am treating it like a medical record." By midnight, Sun Hee had become clearer. She remembered the broken glass, remembered Peter entering before Evelyn returned from the kitchen, and remembered feeling suddenly heavy and frightened. Evelyn documented those statements without suggesting what they meant. The next morning, she discovered that the photograph of young Sun Hee and the baby was gone from the bedside drawer. The brass key was still hidden where Evelyn had placed it inside her locked nursing case. But the message was unmistakable. Someone now knew what Sun Hee was trying to protect. Evelyn said nothing about the missing photograph until Elaine returned that afternoon. The attorney listened, checked the empty drawer herself, then asked whether anyone had searched Evelyn's belongings. "No," Evelyn said. "But I would like that fact to remain true." Elaine's mouth tightened. "It should." Sun Hee, propped against the pillows, looked smaller than she had 2 days earlier, but no less determined. "There is another photograph," she said. "The one in the box is not the only proof." Peter entered before she could explain further. He carried a document folder and announced that the Han Family Legacy Trust needed Sun Hee's signature before the quarter closed. Elaine stood. "I represent your mother personally on estate matters. You can leave the documents with me." Peter's tone stayed courteous. "This concerns corporate governance. It concerns a woman in a hospital bed, being asked to sign something she has not reviewed. Sun Hee looked at Evelyn. "Do you see why I chose someone outside this family to—" Peter's eyes moved to the brass key-shaped bulge beneath the flap of Evelyn's locked nursing case. The glance lasted less than a second, but Evelyn saw it. So did Elaine. Peter left the folder and walked out without another argument. Once the door closed, Elaine picked up the papers and discovered they were not routine trust documents at all. They included language transferring temporary voting authority from Sun Hee's personal trust to a management committee chaired by Peter. Effective immediately and continuing through estate administration, Michael's name appeared on the committee too, but his signature line was blank. Sun Hee laughed once, without humor. "My younger son has always believed a blank line is merely a delayed surrender." Elaine sealed the papers inside her briefcase. Evelyn asked whether Michael knew what Peter had brought. Sun Hee turned toward the window. "Michael knows many things after they become emergencies." That evening, Evelyn found Michael in the library and asked him directly whether he had approved a temporary transfer of his mother's voting rights. He looked genuinely confused. What transfer? She did not show him the documents because they belonged to Elaine, but she described the request without revealing the daughter. Michael's expression hardened with each sentence. "Peter told me Mother wanted the trust simplified before she died." "Did your mother tell you that?" "No." "Then perhaps you should ask her while she still can." Michael looked offended, then ashamed that he had been offended. He went upstairs alone. 20 minutes later, Evelyn heard voices through the closed bedroom door, first controlled, then breaking into something painfully human. "You keep discussing my death as if it is a board meeting," Sun Hee told her son. Michael answered too softly for Evelyn to hear. Then Sun Hee said, "I needed you to ask me what I wanted, not tell me what you could arrange." When Michael emerged, his face was pale. He stopped beside Evelyn without looking at her. She said, "I have spent 10 years protecting her from inconvenience." Evelyn waited. And she said, "I never noticed that protection can become another kind of prison." That sounds like something she would say. Michael finally looked at her. "You agree with her?" "I am not your family therapist." "No. You are apparently the only person in this house who answers a question without first calculating the cost." That was the first moment respect passed between them without either pretending it was merely professional courtesy. The next 3 days were quieter, which made Evelyn more nervous rather than less. Sun Hee slept often, but during her clear periods, she told stories about arriving in America, raising 2 sons, and helping build the family company. She never spoke about Anna unless the bedroom door was locked and Elaine was present by phone. Then, on Sunday afternoon, Sun Hee asked Evelyn to bring the brass key. "I want you to hear the whole instruction before I become too tired to give it." Evelyn sat beside the bed with her notebook closed. Sun Hee said the key opened a safe deposit box established under her birth surname, not under Han. Elaine possessed the bank and estate authorization necessary for Evelyn to enter the box after Sun Hee's death. Sun Hee had instructed them to wait until after the reading of the will, unless one emergency condition occurred. "What emergency condition?" Evelyn asked. "If someone claims to be my daughter before then..." Evelyn stared at her. Sun Hee's breathing was shallow, but her gaze stayed steady. "You think someone might do that to..." "I think someone stole enough letters to learn what I planned." "Why would a stranger pretend to be your daughter?" "Because my daughter inherits part of my personal estate and a successor voting seat in the Han family legacy trust. There, it was a motive large enough to turn an old grief into a present danger." Sun Hee explained that the money mattered less than the voting interest, her daughter's eventual voting seat. Combined with Michael's, could block Peter from controlling major trust decisions. Legal recognition would also trigger an independent review of recent transactions. Evelyn immediately thought about Peter's proposed transfer documents. Sun Hee saw the realization in her face. "I do not know what Peter is hiding," she said. "And I do not know whether Michael has been careless or complicit." "You still do not know which son took the letters?" "No." That uncertainty wounded Sun-hee more deeply than the disease. Later that night, Michael brought his mother tea and stayed at her bedside for nearly 2 hours. Evelyn watched from the hall as he rubbed lotion into the dry skin of Sun-hee's hands, while she corrected his Korean pronunciation like he was 12. Whatever his failures, the affection between them was real. That made the betrayal harder, because love and damage had been living inside the same family for years. Evelyn knew families were rarely simple enough to divide into love on one side and damage on the other. On Monday morning, Michael asked her to join him for coffee in the sunroom. "I want to change her care plan," he said. "Less interruption, fewer family visitors, whatever gives her more control. Discuss with her first." "I already did." That answer pleased Evelyn more than she intended to show. Michael noticed anyway. "You were prepared to correct me." "I remain prepared." He laughed, and the sound startled both of them. For several minutes they spoke about ordinary things, hospital food, bad coffee, and the strange architecture of the enormous house. Then Michael asked why Evelyn had chosen private palliative nursing after years in hospital leadership. She almost gave him the polished answer she used with agencies. Instead, she told him about her own mother, who had died 9 years earlier after weeks of relatives speaking around her rather than to her. "The hardest part was not the illness," Evelyn said. "It was watching everyone act as if fear had canceled her right to choose." Michael looked toward the hallway leading to Sun-hee's room. "So when you challenge me, you are not trying to win." "No, I am trying not to repeat something I already regret." The conversation ended when Peter entered the sunroom. He looked from Michael to Evelyn and understood too much from the quiet between them. "Mother is asking for you," he told Evelyn. Sun-hee was not asking for her. She was unconscious. Evelyn moved quickly, called for medical support, checked the bedside records, and stayed beside her until the physician arrived. The decline was serious, but nothing in that moment allowed Evelyn to claim someone had caused it. She refused to turn suspicion into diagnosis. Still, another medication entry had been made during the 40 minutes Evelyn had been in the sunroom. The initials beside the entry did not belong to Evelyn. The agency relief nurse scheduled for that morning had not yet arrived. Evelyn photographed the page before anyone could remove it. Peter saw her do it. By evening, Sun-hee woke briefly. Michael sat on one side of the bed, Peter on the other, while Evelyn stood near the window. Sun-hee looked at both sons, as though measuring the distance between the boys she remembered and the men they had become. Then she asked them to leave. Peter protested. Michael touched his brother's shoulder. "She asked us to leave." When the room was quiet, Sun-hee motioned Evelyn closer. Her voice was barely audible. "The blue ribbon," she whispered. Evelyn showed her the brass key still tied to it. Sun-hee relaxed. "Find my daughter." After returning to the hall, Evelyn moved the key from her locked nursing case to the hidden inside pocket of her coat and kept it on her person. "I will try." "Do not promise to try," Evelyn swallowed. "Then I promise I will not stop because someone powerful tells me to stop." Sun-hee's eyes softened. "That is better." She slept again before Evelyn could ask another question. At 3:11 the following morning, with both sons present and rain returning against the windows, Sun-hee Han died. Michael held his mother's left hand until the physician confirmed what everyone in the room already understood. Peter stood at the foot of the bed, expressionless, staring at the drawer where the missing photograph had once been. Evelyn gave the family privacy and went downstairs to complete her final nursing documentation. She had written only 4 lines when Peter entered the office with the estate's security manager behind him. "There is a problem," he said. Evelyn capped her pen. Peter placed a velvet jewelry box on the desk. My mother's jade pendant is missing. Evelyn knew the pendant. Sun-hee had worn it on the first day, then asked Elaine to place it in the bedroom safe. I have not touched it. Peter nodded toward the security manager. Then you will not mind if we clear this up. Evelyn stood. You may not search my personal belongings without my consent or proper authority. Michael appeared in the doorway before Peter could answer. What is happening? Peter explained that the pendant had vanished and that only staff with bedroom access could have taken it. Michael looked sick with grief and impatience. Peter, this can wait. No. Mother has been dead 3 hours, and something worth 6 figures is already gone. Evelyn looked at Michael. Your mother's personal attorney can verify where the pendant was last stored. Peter said Elaine was not answering her phone. Then the security manager pointed toward Evelyn's nursing case. A corner of green silk was visible through the partially opened side pocket. Evelyn stopped breathing for 1 stunned second. She had locked that case before going upstairs. Michael stepped forward and pulled the pocket open, without touching what was inside. The jade pendant lay wrapped in Sun-hee's green handkerchief. No one spoke. Peter's face arranged itself into disappointment. Evelyn looked at Michael, waiting for the one thing that mattered more than outrage, whether he would think before he judged. His eyes moved from the pendant to her face. Did you take it? No. Was your case locked? Yes. Peter exhaled sharply. Michael. Listen to yourself. Evelyn turned to the security manager. Preserve every hallway recording from midnight onward. Do not overwrite anything. Peter laughed once. You are giving instructions. Now I am protecting myself. Michael did not defend her. He did something almost as important. He told security to preserve the footage exactly as she requested. But he also told Evelyn her assignment at the estate was finished, effective immediately. The words landed harder than she expected. She understood why he could not keep a suspected thief inside his mother's home. Understanding did not make humiliation easier. Evelyn removed the brass key from the hidden inside pocket of her coat before surrendering the nursing case for inventory. Sun-hee had placed the key in her care through a witnessed instruction, and no pendant could erase that responsibility. As she walked through the front doors into the cold dawn, Peter followed her onto the steps. You should forget whatever my mother told you, he said. Evelyn turned. He smiled politely for the security camera above them. Grief makes people say strange things. Evelyn looked directly into the lens, then back at him. So does fear. For the first time. Peter stopped smiling. Evelyn drove home to Stamford with Sun-hee's last request repeating louder than Peter's accusation. Though both had become dangerous in different ways. She did not sleep. She copied her notes, stored the originals securely, and wrote a timeline while every detail remained fresh. At 8:30, Elaine Park finally called and said 5 words before anything else. Do not give anyone the key. Evelyn told her about the pendant, the dismissal, and Peter's warning on the front steps. Elaine was silent long enough that Evelyn checked whether the call had dropped. Then the attorney said, Sun-hee anticipated resistance, but I do not think she anticipated someone framing you for theft. Did she anticipate a false daughter? Yes. Elaine explained that Sun-hee had revised her estate plan 3 months earlier after learning someone had searched her private correspondence. The sealed plan named her firstborn daughter without a current legal name because Sun-hee did not know what name adoption had given her. 30% of Sun-hee's personal estate would pass to that daughter if identity could be established through lawful documentation and biological evidence. More important, the daughter would receive Sun-hee's voting seat in the Han Family Legacy Trust, which held voting interests in several legacy family assets and funded long-standing charitable programs. If the daughter is never found, Evelyn asked, her share goes into a protected charitable trust, not to either son. That detail changed the motive. Someone could not simply inherit more by making the daughter disappear. but they could prevent her from voting and avoid the review her arrival would trigger. Elaine confirmed what Sun Hee had hinted. Legal recognition of a new family beneficiary automatically triggered an independent review of recent trust transactions, and froze disputed restructuring until the review could report. Peter wanted those voting rights moved before his mother died. Evelyn said, "I know. Why? That is a question I am now asking with considerably less patience," before ending the call. Elaine instructed Evelyn to keep the key and wait until after the reading of the will. But Sun Hee had created one early opening exception if someone claimed to be the daughter or evidence arose that another person was impersonating her before the will reading. Elaine and Evelyn could open the box immediately. Until the will reading, or that emergency condition, the box remained sealed. That same morning, Michael sat alone in his mother's study while security technicians copied every recording from the previous night. He had slept less than an hour and trusted his own judgment less than he had at any point in his adult life. Peter wanted the theft reported immediately and kept repeating that grief should not make Michael sentimental about a nurse they barely knew. Michael ignored him and watched the footage himself. At 2:48 in the morning, Evelyn entered Sun Hee's bedroom and did not leave until after the physician pronounced death. At 3:22, a housekeeping cart stopped outside the downstairs office where Evelyn's nursing case had been left, and the person pushing it stepped inside for nearly 90 seconds. The person wore a dark uniform and kept their face turned away from the camera. No housekeeper had been scheduled on that floor at 3:22. 6 minutes later, the cart disappeared toward a service stairwell not covered by the main hallway camera. The footage did not identify the person, but it proved someone had approached Evelyn's belongings while she was upstairs. Michael called her before noon. She let it ring twice before answering. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You owe me preserved evidence. I have that too." He explained the footage and said the pendant matter would not be reported as employee theft. Evelyn felt relief, then anger that relief was necessary. "You still dismissed me before checking the recordings. My mother had just died." That explains a poor decision. It does not make the decision good. Michael accepted the sentence with, "I know." He offered to pay the remainder of Evelyn's contract and contact her agency personally to state that no professional misconduct had been established. She thanked him, because repairing practical damage mattered more than making him suffer through an apology. Then Michael asked whether his mother had told Evelyn something he needed to know. Evelyn's hand closed around the brass key on her kitchen table. "Yes. What I will tell you when Elaine says I am legally free to do so." Michael's voice cooled. "You are keeping a secret from me about my mother." "I am honoring an instruction your mother gave while lucid, in front of her attorney." The distinction stopped him. For 3 days, the Hahn family prepared a funeral that looked less like grief than a state ceremony. Condolence flowers arrived from CEOs, senators, university presidents, and families whose names were engraved on hospital wings. Evelyn planned to stay away until Elaine called with an unexpected request. "Sun Hee left written instructions that you attend." Evelyn almost laughed. "Your client enjoyed difficult assignments. She enjoyed watching people discover they could survive them." The funeral took place at a Korean Presbyterian church in Manhattan, where Sun Hee had quietly funded elder care programs for 20 years. Evelyn sat near the back, dressed in black, aware that several Hahn employees recognized the nurse accused of stealing a dead woman's jewelry. Michael saw her before the service began. He crossed the aisle, ignoring the attention it created, and stopped beside her pew. "Thank you for coming. She asked me to..." His expression softened. "That sounds like her." Peter arrived moments later, saw Evelyn, and whispered something to Elaine that made the attorney's shoulders stiffen. Nothing else happened until the final hymn. Then, a woman in a gray coat approached Sun Hee's portrait carrying the missing photograph from the estate bedroom. Evelyn recognized the image before she recognized the woman holding it. The stranger appeared to be in her late 50s, with dark hair streaked silver and tears moving freely down her face. She touched the glass over Sun Hee's portrait and whispered, "I came too late." Michael stepped forward. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" The woman turned and looked directly at him. "My name is Rebecca Cole." Peter moved closer, visibly stunned. Rebecca lifted the old photograph of 21-year-old Sun Hee holding a newborn outside the brick church. "Your mother was my mother, too." The church seemed to lose all sound at once. Michael stared at the photograph, then at Elaine, then at Evelyn. Evelyn understood immediately why Sun Hee had created the condition attached to the safe deposit box. A daughter had appeared before they found one. Peter was the first person to recover. "This is absurd." Rebecca reached into her handbag and produced 3 color photocopies of old, yellowed letters addressed to Anna, each signed with Sun Hee's initials. "I did not come for a scene," she said. "I came because she asked me to forgive her." Evelyn's attention fixed on one sentence Rebecca quoted from memory. She wrote that a mother can spend a lifetime being punished by the silence she chose when she was young. Sun Hee had spoken almost the same words to Evelyn in the bedroom, but that conversation had never been public. Michael looked at Evelyn. "You knew I knew your mother had a daughter before she married your father." The shock on his face was more painful than anger. Peter turned on her. "And you said nothing while she was dying." "Your mother instructed me not to tell either son until her attorney authorized it." Elaine stepped between them. "That instruction was lawful and witnessed by me." Rebecca began crying harder, and people nearby started recording on their phones despite requests for privacy. Michael asked everyone except family, Elaine, Evelyn, and Rebecca to leave the side chapel. There, Rebecca told a story that fit the known facts almost perfectly. She said she had been adopted by an American couple. She discovered Korean adoption records in her 40s. She received anonymous birthday cards for years. A little over a week earlier, a courier had delivered photocopies of Sun Hee's letters and told her the sender was dying. "Who sent the courier?" Elaine asked. Rebecca shook her head. "I don't know." Peter paced near the door. "Convenient." Rebecca looked at him. "I agree." That answer was good enough to sound honest. Then she made one mistake. She said Sun Hee had promised that the blue ribbon would lead her home. Evelyn's fingers went cold around the brass key hidden beneath her coat. The blue ribbon phrase appeared in none of Rebecca's 3 copies. Elaine had witnessed Sun Hee give Evelyn the brass key, but no one outside that private handoff should have known the faded blue ribbon mattered. Rebecca should not have known it. Someone had given Rebecca information from inside the house. Evelyn said nothing until she and Elaine were alone after the service. Then she repeated the phrase exactly. Elaine's face changed. "You are certain?" "Completely." Elaine opened her calendar. "Then Sun Hee's early opening condition has been met." The following morning, Evelyn and Elaine entered a private bank vault in Manhattan using Sun Hee's authorization and the brass key. Inside the box were 32 returned letters, an adoption agency receipt, 2 photographs, a sealed digital drive, and a handwritten note addressed to whoever held the brass key. The first line read, "If a daughter appears too easily, do not let hope make you careless." The second line was worse. "Someone in my family already knows enough to manufacture one." Evelyn read Sun Hee's note twice while Elaine cataloged every item in the box and photographed its position before anything was moved. The returned letters covered 34 years, some unopened, others stamped with forwarding marks from addresses in Illinois, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Several envelopes were addressed to Anna So, but later ones used only the initials A.S., suggesting Sun Hee had lost confidence in the birth name. The adoption receipt came from a Chicago agency that had closed in the early 1980s after transferring its records to a church-affiliated archive. One photograph showed the same brick church from the first image, but this time a sign beside the entrance was legible: St. Matthew Community Mission, Chicago. Elaine stared at the name. That organization still exists? Although not in the same building. Evelyn examined the sealed digital drive but refused to open it until Elaine confirmed the written instructions. Sun-Hee's note said the drive was to remain sealed until a biological daughter had been identified or a legal challenge made the recording necessary. She planned layers. Evelyn said, she spent 58 years learning what happens when powerful people control the only version of a story. Elaine replied, the final item was a small envelope containing a list of dates, each corresponding to a birthday between 1968 and 2026. Beside 12 dates, Sun-Hee had written a city, and the later entries clustered around Columbus, Ohio. Evelyn felt the first genuine surge of hope since Sun-Hee's death. Elaine warned her not to assume the list identified the daughter, but agreed it was the strongest lead they had. Before they left the bank, Michael called Elaine and demanded an immediate family meeting about Rebecca. Elaine told him there would be one, but first she was arranging independent identity testing with Rebecca's consent. Michael insisted Evelyn attend. Peter objected before the meeting even began. By 4 that afternoon, the four of them sat around a conference table at Han Meridian's Manhattan headquarters, while Rebecca waited in another room. Michael looked at the brass key in front of Evelyn and understood that his mother had entrusted something important to a woman he had fired. What did the box contain? He asked. Elaine answered only what the estate documents allowed her to disclose before identity verification. There is evidence supporting the existence of a daughter, and evidence that someone may have anticipated an imposter. Peter pushed back from the table. You are seriously entertaining this? Your mother did, Elaine said. Michael looked at Evelyn. Do you believe Rebecca is lying? I believe she knew something she should not have known. Evelyn explained the blue ribbon and watched both brothers carefully. Michael looked confused. Peter looked irritated that a small detail had become important. You are building a conspiracy out of a ribbon, Peter said. No, Evelyn replied. Your mother built a warning around it. I am paying attention. Michael ordered that Rebecca be treated respectfully until testing was complete, and that no financial discussion occur beforehand. Peter argued that a confidential settlement could spare the family public embarrassment, even if Rebecca's claim remained uncertain. That suggestion made Elaine sit straighter. You want to pay a woman before establishing whether she is your sister? I want to avoid a circus. Evelyn watched Michael's face change as he heard the same thing she heard. Peter wanted the question closed more than he wanted it answered. Rebecca agreed to DNA testing without resistance, which made the deception harder to understand. She also agreed to give Elaine the 3 photocopies she possessed for paper printing and provenance examination. For 2 days, the family waited. During that time, Evelyn returned to work with another patient, but the Han mystery followed her into every quiet hour. Michael called once to tell her he had reviewed the estate hallway footage again and identified no employee matching the person with the housekeeping cart. He had also discovered that a service uniform was missing from a storage room. Who had access? Evelyn asked. Too many people. Then narrow it by motive, not by keys. There was a pause. You make investigation sound like nursing. It is not, but both become dangerous when people decide the answer before they collect the facts. Michael laughed quietly, then admitted he had been thinking about her criticism since his mother died. He told Evelyn that after his wife died 8 years earlier, he responded to grief by controlling everything he still could. He had brought the same habit into his mother's illness, arranging specialists, schedules, drivers, meals, and decisions, until love became administration. My mother hated being managed, he said. She hated being erased. That is worse. Yes. The conversation lasted 20 minutes longer than necessary and ended only when Michael's assistant interrupted him for a board call. The next morning, Elaine asked Evelyn to meet at the testing laboratory with both brothers and Rebecca. Rebecca arrived carrying Sun He's photograph like a shield. She looked genuinely afraid when the physician entered with the sealed results. Michael stood near the window, Peter beside him, while Evelyn remained close to Elaine. The result was simple enough that nobody needed a medical explanation. Rebecca Cole was not biologically related to Michael or Peter Hahn. Rebecca's face collapsed. "No," she whispered. "That cannot be right." Peter swore under his breath and turned away. Michael did not move. Elaine asked Rebecca where she had obtained the letters and photograph. "I told you. A courier." "Who paid you?" "Nobody paid me." Then Evelyn asked the question that broke Rebecca's performance. "Who told you about the blue ribbon?" Rebecca looked toward Peter before she could stop herself. The glance lasted less than a second. It was enough. Peter immediately said, "Do not look at me, because she looked at me." Michael's attention sharpened. Rebecca grabbed her handbag and demanded to leave. Elaine told her she was free to go, but warned that the estate would investigate the documents she had presented. Rebecca fled the room. Peter followed 5 minutes later, claiming he had another meeting. Evelyn and Michael stayed behind with Elaine. Michael pressed both hands against the conference table. "My mother knew this could happen?" "Yes," Elaine said. "And somebody gave that woman private information?" "Yes." Michael looked at Evelyn. "You thought it was one of us from the beginning. Your mother did." The sentence hurt him more than accusation would have. They left separately to avoid reporters gathering near the lobby, but Evelyn found Peter waiting beside her car in the underground garage. The concrete air smelled of rainwater and gasoline when Peter appeared beside Evelyn's car, his face stripped of its usual control. "You should have let my mother die with her secret," he said. Evelyn stopped several feet away and kept her phone in her hand. "Rebecca looked at you. She looked at everyone. She knew about the ribbon." Peter stepped closer. "You are a nurse who became emotionally attached to a dying woman. Do not confuse that with authority." Evelyn lifted the brass key where he could see it. "Your mother gave me authority over one thing." "You seem very concerned about what it opened." His composure cracked. "You have no idea what you are dragging into the light." Michael's voice came from behind him. "Then explain it." Peter turned. Michael stood beside the elevator, staring at his brother as though the garage had divided their childhood into before and after. Peter recovered quickly. "You followed me. I came to apologize to Evelyn for putting her in this position." "No. You came because you trust a stranger more than your own brother." Michael looked at Evelyn, then back at Peter. "Right now, she has lied to me less." Peter walked away without another word. Evelyn finally understood that the false daughter had been deliberate, and Peter knew enough about the secret to fear the search. But a larger question replaced it immediately. What had Peter done that made the existence of his own sister more dangerous than an imposter walking into their mother's funeral? Elaine found the first part of that answer 2 days later. A preliminary records examination by outside trust counsel showed that Peter's real estate division had borrowed against assets connected to the Hahn family legacy trust. The transaction itself was complicated, but the consequence was clear. If a new beneficiary were legally recognized, Sun He's plan would trigger a formal independent review with broader access to recent trust transactions. If that review examined the underlying guarantees, it could expose decisions Peter had never disclosed to Michael or the trust's other trustees. "How much?" Michael asked when Elaine briefed them. "Enough to threaten Peter's division and potentially his position inside Hahn Meridian." Michael sat in silence. Evelyn expected anger. Instead, she saw grief. "My mother knew he was hiding something. She suspected," Elaine corrected. That is why she designed a process that would force facts into the open. Michael looked at the list of cities from the safe deposit box. Then we find my sister before Peter finds another way to stop the process. The search for Sun Hee's daughter began with paper, not private jets, because Elaine insisted that every step survive legal scrutiny later. She contacted the successor archive for the Chicago Adoption Agency, while Evelyn studied Sun Hee's list of birthday dates and cities. Michael assigned a corporate investigator, but Evelyn objected when the man proposed searching Grace through commercial databases before confirming the archive trail. "Your mother wanted her found," Evelyn said. "She did not give us permission to invade every woman in Ohio who shares an age." Michael dismissed the investigator from the room and asked Elaine to use formal channels first. Peter, meanwhile, stopped answering family calls and issued a statement through Han Meridian denying any dispute over Sun Hee's estate. The statement described Rebecca as an unrelated individual who presented an unverified personal claim, carefully avoiding the word daughter. 3 days later, the archive produced a breakthrough. The infant, known as Anna So, had been placed through St. Matthew Community Mission with a married couple from Illinois named Thomas and Margaret Mitchell. The child's first name had been changed to Grace. A later administrative note showed the family moved to Dayton, Ohio, when Grace was 11. A search of public records placed Grace Mitchell in the Columbus area for more than 20 years, matching the later cities on Sun Hee's list. Evelyn stared at the match until the letters blurred. "We have her," Michael said. "We have a woman whose life fits the trail." Elaine corrected. "We still approach her as a person, not an inheritance problem." Michael agreed to travel to Ohio with Evelyn after Elaine sent a formal letter requesting a private conversation. Grace replied 2 days later with one sentence, "I do not know the Han family, but records my parents left me name my birth mother as Sun Hee." That sentence changed the atmosphere of the entire search. On the flight to Columbus, Michael sat beside Evelyn without opening his laptop for the first time she had ever seen. He admitted he had barely slept since learning the adoption record existed. "I keep remembering my mother at different ages," he said. At 40, at 60, at 70, all those years. She carried this alone. Not entirely alone. Evelyn said someone helped her track the birthdays. Elaine says it was probably through charity contacts. Probably is not the same as proven. Michael turned toward her. "You really do distrust conclusions." "I distrust conclusions that arrive before evidence. And people have to work harder," he smiled. But the question remained between them because both knew he was asking whether she trusted him. Grace chose to meet them at a public botanical garden rather than her home. She was 58, tall, silver-haired, and carried herself with the calm authority of someone accustomed to classrooms and difficult parents. She had retired from public school administration 2 years earlier after more than 3 decades in education, and she now spent part of each week helping with her 3 grandchildren. When she saw Michael, she stopped walking. He had Sun Hee's eyes. Grace noticed it too. "You look like the photographs," she said. Michael's voice failed before he answered. "So do you." Grace did not hug him. She sat across from Evelyn and Michael at a quiet garden table and placed a shoebox between them. Inside were 27 birthday cards, most signed only with the letter S. The earliest card had arrived when Grace was 31, after both adoptive parents had died. The messages were restrained at first. "May your life be larger than the fear of those who made choices for you." Later cards became more personal, mentioning books, teaching, and cities Grace had lived in without explaining how the sender knew. "I thought it was someone from the adoption agency." Grace said, "The last card came 6 months ago." Evelyn asked whether anyone had contacted her recently. "A man called 3 weeks ago and asked whether I had ever been known as Anna So." Michael went still. "What man?" He would not give a name. When I asked why, he hung up. Based on the dates Elaine had already documented, the call appeared to have come only a few days after Evelyn first learned the letters were missing. The timing suggested Peter's consultant had begun canvassing possible adoptees almost immediately. But the abrupt call showed he had not identified Grace with certainty. Grace studied Michael. "Why did your mother wait until she was dying?" Michael did not protect Soon-Hee with a comforting answer. "I do not know yet." Grace looked down at the shoebox. "Then I do not know whether I want to know. Her money either." "We did not come to offer you money," Michael said. "You came because money is involved." He could not deny it. Evelyn finally spoke. "Your mother asked me to find you before her sons did. I think she was trying to protect your choice, not purchase it." Grace's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. "You were with her when she died?" "Yes." "Did she say my name?" "She called you her daughter." That was the first moment Grace cried. Not loudly. She simply covered her mouth and turned toward the winter greenhouse, while 58 lost years settled onto one wooden table. Michael looked away to give her privacy and found himself fighting tears of his own. Evelyn understood then that money and fraud had never been the deepest wound in the room. It was a daughter learning that the mother who surrendered her had never succeeded in forgetting her. Grace eventually agreed to biological testing, but only after Elaine explained that she could refuse the inheritance regardless of the result. Before leaving, Grace gave Evelyn permission to photograph the birthday cards for comparison with Sun-Hee's known handwriting. One card contained a detail none of them expected. Written beneath a pressed blue flower were the words, "One day the ribbon will make sense." Evelyn stared at the sentence. Sun-Hee had not invented the blue ribbon in her final week. It had been part of a private symbol connecting mother and daughter for years, even if Grace never understood it. Elaine then remembered that Soon-Hee kept drafts and photocopies of some birthday messages among the private correspondence that had disappeared. Peter could have learned the ribbon there without hearing Evelyn's bedroom conversation. The clue still pointed toward whoever stole the correspondence, but it widened the timeline of the betrayal instead of proving where Rebecca had learned the phrase. On their drive back to the hotel, Michael asked Evelyn why she had looked disappointed by the new explanation. "Because certainty is comfortable," she said. "I was certain Peter learned about the ribbon from the estate. Now I know there was another path. You are giving my brother the benefit of doubt after he threatened you. No, I am refusing to make his guilt bigger than the evidence." Michael was quiet for several blocks. "My mother chose well." Evelyn looked out the window. "She chose someone stubborn. Those may be the same thing." They ate dinner in the hotel restaurant because an ice storm delayed their return flight. The conversation began with Grace and ended somewhere neither expected, in the parts of their own lives they rarely discussed. Michael told Evelyn, his wife. Hannah had died of an aneurysm 8 years earlier, after a marriage that had become polite and lonely. He did not pretend to have been a perfect husband. "I was present for every important event," he said. "I just was not present for the ordinary hours between them." Evelyn told him she had been divorced for 11 years and had stopped believing companionship should require shrinking herself to protect someone else's comfort. "That sounds like experience." Michael said, "It sounds like tuition." He laughed so hard the couple at the next table looked over. The warmth between them was real, but neither treated it like a promise. They were two middle-aged people carrying too much unfinished family business to confuse one honest dinner with love. When Evelyn returned to her room, the door was slightly open. She stopped before touching it. The room had been searched. Her suitcase lay overturned. The mattress shifted, and papers from her nursing folder were scattered across the carpet. Nothing valuable was missing except the photocopied list from Sun-Hee's safe deposit box. Evelyn called hotel security, then Michael and Elaine. Michael arrived first, furious enough that Evelyn had to tell him twice not to enter until security documented the room. "This happened because I brought you into my family's problem," he said.
"This happened because someone wants information."
"That distinction does not make you safer." "No, but it matters for what we do next." The hotel cameras showed a man wearing a maintenance jacket entering with a cloned keycard while Evelyn and Michael were at dinner. His face remained hidden beneath a cap. The pattern mirrored the housekeeping disguise used at the Hahn estate. For the first time, Michael said aloud what he had resisted thinking. "Peter has access to people who could do this." "So do you," Evelyn replied. He flinched. "I am not accusing you. I am reminding you that power is not evidence." Michael nodded. "Then we follow evidence." The next morning, Elaine called with results from the handwriting review. The birthday cards Grace possessed were almost certainly written by Sun Hee across many years. The ink, paper aging, and handwriting progression were consistent with different periods rather than a recent fabrication. Grace had not appeared out of nowhere to fit the Hahn family's crisis. She had been inside Sun Hee's story long before any of them knew to look. The biological test would take several more days, but Michael no longer spoke about Grace as a possibility. He called her by name. Before leaving Ohio, Grace gave him one final object from the shoebox. It was an unopened birthday card, dated only 6 months earlier. "I could never make myself open the last one," she said. "I was angry at a stranger who knew too much and explained too little." Michael held the envelope carefully. "Do you want to open it now?" Grace shook her head and handed it to Evelyn. "Not until the test tells me whether I have the right to grieve her." Evelyn wanted to tell her grief did not require laboratory permission. Instead, she respected the boundary, placed the envelope inside a document sleeve, and promised it would remain sealed. That promise would become painfully important 3 days later. The biological result arrived on a Thursday morning while Evelyn was sitting in Elaine's office with Michael and the sealed birthday card between them. Grace joined by video from Ohio, refusing Michael's offer to fly her back to New York before she knew what the paper said. Elaine read the conclusion once, then slid the report toward Michael. The result provided overwhelming support for the conclusion that Michael Hahn and Grace Mitchell were maternal half-siblings. Michael covered his mouth with one hand. Grace did not move at all for nearly 10 seconds. No one spoke. Then Grace whispered, "So she really was mine." Michael's answer came broken. "And you are really my sister." Grace turned away from the camera and cried where none of them could pretend not to see it. Evelyn waited until Grace returned to the screen before touching the sealed birthday card. "You decide," she said. "It is still yours." Grace nodded. "Open it." Evelyn broke the old adhesive carefully and unfolded a cream card with a pressed blue flower attached inside. Sun Hee's handwriting had become unsteady, but the message was unmistakable. "My dear daughter, I have spent too many years believing regret was the same as repair. It is not." The next lines apologized without asking Grace to forgive, explained that fear had once been stronger than courage, and said Sun Hee had watched from a distance. Then came a sentence that changed Elaine Park's face before Evelyn even finished reading it aloud. "Elaine knows what my husband did after the adoption. Ask her for the truth I was too ashamed to tell you." Grace stared at the screen. Michael slowly turned toward the attorney, who had served his family for more than 30 years. Elaine removed her glasses. I wondered whether she would make me say what Michael asked. Elaine's voice was steady only because she had clearly rehearsed the confession in private many times. In 1989, when Elaine was a junior associate at the law firm representing Michael's father, she was instructed to prepare a confidentiality agreement. The agreement went to Grace's adoptive parents after Sun Hee's private search had come dangerously close to identifying the Mitchell family. Michael's father offered to cover Grace's remaining educational expenses, if the Mitchells kept Sun-hee's identity and Grace's location confidential and refused to facilitate contact without Grace's explicit consent. The Mitchells refused the money, but signed a narrower privacy agreement promising not to disclose their address or act as intermediaries unless Grace herself asked them to. Michael stared at Elaine. My father knew where she was. Yes, my mother knew, not the address. Your father told her the search had failed and warned that any further attempt would cause a scandal. Grace's voice came through the laptop. And you helped him. Elaine closed her eyes briefly. Yes. The answer was not softened by explanation. Elaine said she had been 29, ambitious, intimidated by powerful clients, and willing to call obedience professionalism. In 1998, after Michael's father died, Elaine confessed her role to Sun-hee and offered to resign from every Han matter. Sun-hee did not forgive her immediately. Instead, she required Elaine to help track Grace lawfully through public records and charity networks, never reveal the Han connection or pressure Grace into contact, and protect the estate plan that would recognize her if she were found. That is why your mother trusted me with the key process, Elaine said. Not because I never betrayed her, because I admitted that had. Grace looked furious. Michael looked devastated. Evelyn understood why Elaine had appeared frightened when Sun-hee first mentioned the missing letters. The past had not been abstract to her. It had been returning with names and dates. Grace ended the call without deciding whether she wanted to speak to Elaine again. Michael remained in the office after everyone else stood. My father built the company I have spent my life protecting, he said. How much of that protection has really been protecting him? Evelyn sat back down. You are allowed to love someone and still tell the truth about what they did. Michael looked at her. Is that how you think about your mother? It is how I learned to think about myself. He reached across the table, but stopped before touching her hand. Evelyn noticed the restraint and placed her hand over his instead. It lasted only a few seconds. Neither called it romance. Before lunch, another development arrived. Rebecca Cole contacted Elaine through an attorney and offered a recorded statement in exchange for cooperation regarding the false claim. Her story confirmed the suspicion, but made Peter's plan clearer. A consultant working for Peter had found Rebecca through adoption forums because her age and partial background resembled the missing daughter's known profile. She was given photocopies of 3 stolen letters, the missing photograph, and a blue ribbon phrase taken from one of Sun-hee's copied birthday notes, all selected to make her story convincing. Peter promised she would never need to become a legally recognized heir. Her role was to make a public claim, create pressure for a confidential settlement, sign a broad waiver, and make the claim appear resolved long enough to delay further searching while Peter tried to unwind the guarantees. The DNA test had not been part of his plan. Peter told Rebecca the family would never risk one because a settlement would be cheaper than public scandal. When Elaine insisted on independent testing, Rebecca panicked but continued because she had already spent part of Peter's advance payment. Michael listened to the recording without interrupting. At the end, he asked only one question. How much did he pay her? $200,000 in 2 installments, Elaine said. Michael closed his eyes. Peter had not simply hidden their sister. He had tried to manufacture a fake daughter at their mother's funeral, so the real search could be discredited and delayed. He had not known that a false claim would unlock the very evidence Sun-hee had hidden from him. Michael ordered Han Meridian's independent directors to preserve all records connected to Peter's division and stepped away from supervising the internal review himself. I will not investigate my brother through a process I control, he said. That decision cost him immediately. Peter called an emergency board meeting and accused Michael of allowing an outside nurse and a resentful attorney to manipulate a grieving family. He claimed the estate search had become a conflict of interest, threatening Han Meridian's reputation, and demanded Michael temporarily surrender executive authority. The allegation leaked before the meeting ended. By evening, financial news channels were discussing a secret air crisis inside one of America's largest Korean-founded family companies. Evelyn's name appeared online beside photographs taken at Sun-hee's funeral. Some reports called her a private nurse involved in the discovery. Others described her as a former employee who had been dismissed after a jewelry dispute. The old accusation Peter had planted was suddenly useful again. Evelyn's nursing agency called to say 2 clients had requested reassignment until the publicity settled. For the first time, the Han family secret directly threatened the career she had spent 3 decades building. Michael arrived at her apartment that night, without security or an assistant. "I can issue a statement clearing you. You should have done that the morning you found the hallway footage." He absorbed the rebuke. "You are right." Evelyn folded her arms. "I do not need you to say I am a good person. I need you to state facts you can prove." Michael nodded and called his communications counsel from her kitchen. Within an hour, Han Meridian publicly confirmed that preserved security footage showed an unidentified person approached Evelyn's belongings while she was caring for Sun-hee upstairs. The statement also said the company had found no evidence that Evelyn stole jewelry or violated professional duties. It did not make the scandal disappear, but by morning her agency restored her assignments and apologized for acting before reviewing the facts. For the first time since Sun-hee's death, public facts moved decisively in Evelyn's favor because she had insisted that evidence be preserved before anyone knew what it would show. Her competence had protected her long before Michael's power did. Grace flew to New York the following day. She did not arrive dressed like an heiress or accompanied by lawyers. She carried the same shoebox of birthday cards and asked to visit Sun-hee's grave before discussing money. Michael went with her. Evelyn stayed several steps away as brother and sister stood together beside the grave of a mother they had never been able to share in life. Grace placed the final birthday card against the stone. "I am angry with her," she said. Michael nodded. "You are allowed." "I love her too. And I do not even know if that makes sense." "It makes more sense than most things in this family." Grace laughed through tears. Then she asked Michael whether he had known. "No. Would you have looked for me?" He took a long time before answering. 20 years ago. I might have protected the family before I protected the truth." Grace studied him. "And now I know what that costs." The answer did not earn forgiveness, because there was nothing yet to forgive between them. It earned something smaller and more valuable, the possibility of trust. That evening, Elaine told them the sealed digital recording from Sun-hee's safe deposit box could now be opened because biological identity had been established. Peter's lawyers immediately objected, arguing that the recording might have been created while Sun-hee lacked capacity. Evelyn knew exactly what that challenge meant. Her nursing notes, medication records, and documented periods of lucidity were about to become central evidence in a war she had never expected to enter. Peter was no longer trying only to hide Grace. He was preparing to erase his mother's credibility after her death. Elaine opened Sun-hee's digital recording in her office with Grace. Michael, Evelyn, and 2 independent witnesses present. The video had been recorded 11 days before Evelyn first entered the Han estate. Sun-hee sat in the same cream bedroom chair, visibly weaker than in old photographs, but alert, composed, and unmistakably herself. She stated the date, named both sons, described Anna Seo's adoption, and explained why she had created a protected inheritance for the daughter. Then she addressed the possibility that someone might challenge her mental capacity. "I am dying," Sun-hee said on the screen. "I am not confused about the child I lost, the sons I raised, or the choices I regret." Grace covered her mouth. Michael watched without blinking. Sun-hee said she had discovered unexplained guarantees involving assets held through the Han Family Legacy Trust and had asked Peter privately for supporting records. He responded by urging her to transfer voting authority before her illness progressed. She did not accuse him of theft because she lacked enough information. Instead, she demanded an independent review if Anna was ever found, and instructed that neither Michael nor Peter control that review. Then Soon-hee surprised everyone by speaking directly about Michael. "My older son will want to fix this quickly, because speed makes him feel useful when he is afraid." Michael lowered his head. "Michael, if you are watching, do not protect this family from the truth. Protect the people who have to live after the truth arrives." Evelyn looked at him. He did not look back. The video ended with a message to Grace. Sun-hee did not ask for forgiveness. She said only, "If you choose to know us, let it be your choice. If you choose to walk away, let that be yours too." Grace wept openly, for several minutes. Nobody discussed the legal value of the recording. They simply sat with a dead woman finally speaking in a room where no one could interrupt her. Peter's attorneys challenged the video the next morning anyway. They argued that Sun-hee's terminal illness, pain treatment, and fluctuating confusion made any late-life estate instruction vulnerable to undue influence. They also suggested Evelyn's unusually close involvement could have affected Soon-hee's decisions, despite the recording predating Evelyn's employment. The contradiction was obvious, but the accusation achieved its purpose by creating another cloud around her name. A formal complaint was submitted to the nursing agency, alleging that Evelyn crossed professional boundaries by accepting a key and participating in estate matters. Evelyn had expected anger from Peter. She had not expected him to attack the professional identity she had spent most of her adult life building. Her agency placed her on a separate formal administrative review while examining Elaine's documentation of Sun-hee's witnessed instruction for 2 days. Evelyn stopped answering Michael's personal calls. She answered Elaine because the legal timeline mattered, and Grace because none of this was Grace's fault. On the third evening, Michael arrived at her apartment and found her packing nursing books into a cardboard box. "What are you doing here?" "Preparing for the possibility that a review panel decides I crossed a line." "You did not." "That is not yours to decide. I can have Han Meridian's counsel respond to every allegation by morning." Evelyn closed the box. "No." Michael stared at her. "Peter is using procedure as a weapon, and you want to use power as a shield?" "Yes. That is exactly the problem." He looked genuinely confused. Evelyn stepped closer. Not angry enough to shout, and too angry to soften the point. "Your mother told you protection became a prison when you decided what she needed without asking." Michael's face changed. "Do not do the same thing to me because you care about me." The last word surprised them both. Michael spoke carefully. "You know I care about you. I know enough to be worried that you think caring gives you permission to take over." He sat down slowly at her kitchen table. "What do you want me to do?" The question was so simple that Evelyn nearly cried. "I want you to tell the truth when you are asked. I want you to preserve evidence. I want you to stop trying to purchase certainty. And if they suspend you, then I fight it through the process available to me. And if the process is unfair, then you may ask me how you can help." Michael nodded. It was the first time in years he had responded to fear by waiting for another person's answer rather than arranging one himself. Evelyn sat across from him. "My mother used to tell me I carried everybody's emergencies like they were proof I was needed," she said. Was she right? Weakly. It was irritating. Michael smiled. "She also told me that being strong can become another way of refusing help. So we are both difficult. That seems established." He reached across the table. "This time." Evelyn took his hand before he asked. The agency review cleared her 4 days later. Elaine's records showed Sun-hee had initiated the key arrangement, understood its purpose, and repeated the instruction while independently represented. Evelyn's contemporaneous notes also documented mental status without exaggeration, including both confusion and lucidity, rather than selectively recording only what helped the estate. That completeness made her records credible. The review panel found no evidence that Evelyn solicited a gift, influenced the will, or acted outside Sun Hee's expressed request for document preservation. Peter's complaint failed, but the attempt created an unexpected consequence for him. The nursing review required certified copies of the medication administration records from Sun Hee's final week. Those records contained the unexplained entries Evelyn had photographed. An external clinical review concluded that several entries required clarification because the initials did not correspond to scheduled nursing staff. Audit metadata showed that several questionable entries had been added from a household administrative terminal under a shared credential, but it could not establish who typed them or whether medication had actually been administered at those times. The reviewers also could not establish who had opened the packet Evelyn photographed, whether any extra dose had been given, or whether the disputed entries reflected administration at all. Evelyn repeatedly refused to turn those unknowns into a claim that medication caused Sun Hee's death. That uncertainty made the disputed entries unreliable as proof of incapacity. Peter's attempt to discredit his mother had opened another door he did not want examined. Meanwhile, the independent trust review uncovered the financial core of Peter's fear. 3 years earlier, his real estate division had suffered severe losses on office properties whose values collapsed after major tenants left. Rather than disclose the full losses and accept restructuring, Peter arranged guarantees through entities connected to the Han Family Legacy Trust. He told himself he was protecting thousands of jobs and preserving the company his parents had built. For a time, the gamble worked. Then interest costs rose, projects weakened further, and Peter began moving obligations between entities so the exposure would not appear in one place. The reviewers did not describe it as a single stolen account or a suitcase of missing cash. They described something more believable, in its own way, more dangerous years of concealment built from one decision Peter had been too proud to admit. Grace's legal recognition had triggered the independent review before Peter could unwind the guarantees quietly. Her eventual succession to Sun Hee's voting seat would also keep him from regaining control over the process. That was why he wanted the voting rights transferred before his mother died. That was why he needed the secret daughter to become a ridiculous story that ended with Rebecca's failed claim. And that was why Sun Hee's missing letters mattered more to him than her jewelry ever had. Michael received the preliminary report in his office and read it alone before calling Peter. His brother answered on the second ring. "Did you find what you wanted?" Peter asked. "No," Michael said. "I found what you were afraid of." Peter arrived 20 minutes later. He did not deny the guarantees. Instead, he accused Michael of cowardice for allowing outsiders to destroy a division Peter had sacrificed years to save. "You think Mother understood what would happen if those loans collapsed? She understood that you were hiding them. I was buying time. With assets you had no right to risk." Peter slammed a hand against the desk. "I saved jobs while you sat in the chairman's office protecting your reputation." Michael did not rise. "You may have started by saving jobs. You ended by hiding risk, targeting a nurse whose evidence frightened you, hiring a false sister, and trying to erase Mother's judgment after she died." Peter's face tightened. "You have Evelyn speaking for you now. No, that is one of the things I've finally learned. Evelyn speaks for herself." Peter laughed bitterly. "And Grace? She will take 30% of Mother's estate and pretend she arrived for love." Michael's voice lowered. "You do not know her. Neither do you, that is true." The admission disarmed Peter for a second. Michael continued, "But I intend to find out who my sister is, without deciding what she must be first." Peter walked to the door, then turned. "If this report goes public, the real estate division falls. People lose jobs. Lenders panic. The family name becomes a scandal. Michael looked at his brother for a long time. You keep describing consequences as if they are crimes committed by the person who reveals them. Peter left without answering. 2 days later, he used his remaining influence to force a joint meeting of Han Meridian's independent directors and the Han Family Legacy Trust trustees. His stated purpose was to challenge Michael's leadership and prevent Grace from assuming Sun He's voting seat until the estate dispute was resolved. His real purpose was clear to everyone involved. If he could delay the review's completion and any public action, he might still renegotiate the guarantees before lenders reacted. Grace surprised Michael by agreeing to attend. I spent 58 years outside this family, she said. I am not going to let my first official act be hiding from it. Evelyn planned to remain outside the meeting until Elaine told her Peter's attorneys intended to question Sun He's final care and mental clarity. They are going to make your notes part of this, whether you enter the room or not. Elaine said. Evelyn thought about her mother, about all the times people had spoken around a patient because speaking for them felt easier. Then she thought about Sun He gripping her wrist and saying that dying had not made her less of a person. I will testify to what I observed, Evelyn said, nothing more. That limit would become her greatest strength in the room. The joint meeting began at 9 on a Monday morning in the 38th floor boardroom of Han Meridian's Manhattan headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city, but nobody in the room appeared interested in the view. Michael sat at one end of the long table, Peter at the other, while Grace took a seat beside Elaine rather than beside either brother. Evelyn sat several chairs away with her nursing records closed in front of her. Peter opened by describing the crisis as an estate dispute that had been allowed to contaminate corporate governance. He acknowledged Grace's biological relationship, but argued that Sun He's late changes should be suspended until questions about her capacity were resolved. Then, his attorney displayed selected nursing entries describing episodes of confusion. The strategy was simple: isolate the worst moments and make them appear to represent every hour of Sun He's final weeks. Evelyn listened until the attorney asked whether Sun He had ever failed to recognize where she was. Yes, Evelyn answered. Peter looked almost relieved. Did she ever confuse past events with present ones? Yes. Did she sometimes become frightened or disoriented after medication? Yes. The attorney turned toward the trustees, as if the case had been established. Then Elaine asked Evelyn her first question. During the same period, did Mrs. Han also experience sustained intervals in which she identified people correctly, understood her diagnosis, expressed consistent wishes, and explained the consequences of her decisions? Yes. Did you document those intervals? Yes. Did you change your notes after learning about the estate plan? No. Did you diagnose Mrs. Han as legally competent? No, that was not my role. What was your role? To observe, care, document, and respect her choices when she could make them. The room grew quieter. Evelyn explained the medication records, including the unexplained entries that appeared before 2 episodes later, cited as proof of confusion. She did not accuse Peter of administering anything. She did not suggest the medication caused Sun He's death. She simply refused to let uncertain facts become dramatic claims, because dramatic claims would weaken the facts she could prove. That restraint mattered more than outrage. Peter's attorney asked why a nurse had accepted a private key from a patient. Evelyn produced Elaine's witnessed instruction, the date, Sun He's stated purpose, and the agency review clearing her conduct. Then Peter interrupted. You were fired from my mother's house after her jewelry was found in your bag. Michael spoke before Evelyn could answer. That allegation was undermined by preserved footage and never substantiated. Peter looked at his brother. By footage that never identified who touched the bag. Correct, Evelyn said. The footage proved an unidentified person entered the office where my locked case had been left while I was upstairs. It did not prove who planted the pendant, and it did not prove I stole it. She met Peter's eyes. I do not claim to know who planted it. I claim only what the evidence supports. Several trustees exchanged glances. Peter had spent weeks portraying Evelyn as emotional and intrusive. In person, she was the most disciplined witness in the room. For the first time, the room began to turn toward Evelyn rather than against her. Elaine then played Rebecca Cole's recorded statement. Rebecca described the stolen letters, the missing photograph, the blue ribbon detail, and the money offered for a false claim followed by a confidential waiver. Peter denied directing payment. Reviewers traced both payments through a consulting entity retained by his division, which also paid a contractor whose phone and hotel records placed him at Evelyn's Ohio hotel during the cloned key intrusion. Peter stared at the documents and stopped pretending Rebecca had invented everything. Instead, he changed his defense. I was trying to contain a fraudulent claimant before she could damage my mother's estate. Grace looked at him for the first time that morning. You found a fraud and gave her my mother's letters. Peter's expression flickered. Grace continued, her voice calm. You gave a stranger the words my mother wrote to the child she lost, then sent that stranger to her funeral. I did not know you existed. You knew enough to be afraid I might. Peter said nothing. Grace opened her shoebox and placed Sun Hee's birthday cards along the table, one by one. I do not need your company to tell me whether she was my mother. She placed the DNA report beside them. And I do not need her money to prove I am her daughter. Peter seized on the statement. Then waive the inheritance. Michael turned sharply toward him. Grace did not. I said I do not need it. I did not say you get to decide what I do with what she left me. The sentence landed harder than shouting. Grace explained that before accepting any distribution, she wanted an independent accounting of the estate and the legacy trust. Exactly as Sun Hee had instructed. If the review showed employees or charitable programs were endangered by Peter's concealed guarantees, she wanted restructuring designed around protecting them, rather than protecting executives. Peter laughed bitterly. You have been in this family for barely 2 weeks and already believe you can run it. Grace looked at Michael. Does anyone run this family? Michael almost smiled. That may be the original problem. Elaine then announced that Sun Hee's recorded statement would be played under the terms of the estate instruction now that Grace's identity was verified. Peter objected again. The independent trustees voted to hear it. Sun Hee appeared on the conference screen, seated in her cream bedroom chair 11 days before Evelyn had ever met her. That date destroyed the suggestion that Evelyn created or influenced the plan. Sun Hee described Anna's adoption, evidence that her private correspondence had been searched, Peter's request for transferred voting authority, and her demand for an independent review. Then she spoke the words that ended Peter's capacity argument more effectively than any lawyer could. If either of my sons says I was too confused to remember my daughter, ask him why he was so afraid I remembered her at all. Nobody moved. Peter stared at the screen. His mother continued. I have made mistakes large enough to last generations. That does not give my children permission to turn my regret into their property. Grace bowed her head. Michael's eyes filled. Peter looked suddenly younger, like a son being corrected in front of a room he had spent his life trying to impress. Sun Hee's final instruction concerned neither inheritance nor punishment. If the review finds wrongdoing, protect the innocent before you punish the guilty. A family name is not worth saving if people must be sacrificed to preserve it. The screen went dark. For several seconds, there was no corporate board, no billionaire chairman, and no disputed estate. There were only 3 living children sitting with the consequences of what their parents had hidden. Peter was the first to break the silence. I did it to save the division. Michael looked at him, all of it Peter's anger drained, leaving exhaustion. The first guarantee was supposed to last 6 months. He explained that a major refinancing had collapsed unexpectedly, leaving projects exposed and thousands of employees vulnerable. He used trust-linked guarantees, believing he could replace them before anyone discovered the risk. When markets worsened, he moved obligations again. Each new concealment existed to protect the previous one, until admitting the first decision became more frightening than committing the next. And Rebecca Grace asked. Peter looked at the birthday cards. When I found Mother's letters, I knew a daughter could force the review immediately. So you invented one, Michael said. I wanted a claim we could settle and close. You framed Evelyn too. Peter did not answer. Evelyn watched his silence carefully. The pendant accusation had never been directly tied to him by preserved evidence, and she would not claim a confession he had not made. Michael understood her look. Did you put Mother's pendant in Evelyn's case? He asked. Peter stared at the table. No. Did you order someone to do it? A long pause followed. Yes. I took the pendant from Mother's safe, gave it to the same contractor, and told him to put it in Evelyn's case. The admission felt smaller than Evelyn expected, perhaps because by then the damage had already been repaired. With evidence, while Peter had to live inside what the admission revealed about him. Why, she asked. He finally looked at her. Because Mother trusted you in less than a week more than she trusted me after 52 years. There was the oldest motive beneath all the financial ones, resentment, sharpened by fear, and a lifetime spent measuring love as rank. Evelyn felt no satisfaction in hearing it. She felt only sadness that a dying woman's trust had become another thing Peter believed someone else had stolen from him. The trustees voted to continue the independent review, freeze disputed trust transactions, and suspend Peter from any authority over the affected entities. Han Meridian's independent directors opened a separate process concerning his undisclosed guarantees and use of corporate consultants in Rebecca's false claim. Michael voluntarily recused himself from decisions involving his brother. He also announced that the company would disclose material financial exposure through proper channels rather than hide it behind family privacy. The decision caused an immediate drop in Han Meridian's market value and days of brutal headlines. Peter had been right about one thing: telling the truth carried a cost. But the review also showed that most underlying businesses could survive if the family accepted losses. Sold several prestige properties and restructured the troubled division openly. Thousands of jobs did not have to disappear simply because Peter had used them as justification for secrecy. Grace used her newly recognized trust vote to support that restructuring. Her first public action as Sun He's daughter was not taking money. It was protecting employees and charitable programs from being sacrificed to preserve property values and executive pride. For older employees nearing retirement, preserving jobs, benefits, and the company's stability mattered far more than the Han family drama dominating television. Peter resigned from his corporate positions 3 weeks later, while outside authorities reviewed the financial disclosures and false claim payments. There were no handcuffs in the boardroom. The consequences arrived more slowly, through resignations, outside review, financial losses, and truths the family could no longer bury. That chapter ended with real consequences: lost authority, public accountability, financial investigation, and a family relationship Peter could not repair with a statement. Michael visited him once before Peter moved out of his Manhattan apartment. Peter asked whether Michael hated him. No, Michael said. That would be easier. Then what do you feel? I feel like my brother spent years becoming someone he thought our father would respect. Peter looked away. And now I think Mother spent her final weeks trying to stop both of us from becoming him. They did not reconcile. They also did not pretend blood alone required immediate forgiveness. For the first time, Michael allowed a relationship to remain unresolved, instead of forcing a clean result. Grace's decision about the inheritance took longer. She accepted Sun He's personal bequest because refusing it solely to prove purity would still allow the Hahn family's expectations to control her choice. She kept a portion, created educational trusts for her grandchildren, and directed a substantial share toward public school and elder care programs. The choices were hers, not a performance of virtue for relatives she had known only weeks. Her most valuable inheritance remained the 32 returned letters from Sun Hee's safe deposit box. Elaine gave them to her in chronological order on a quiet Saturday morning. Grace spent 6 hours reading, without opening the office door. Some letters were apologetic, some were angry at herself. Some described Michael and Peter as children, allowing Grace to meet brothers she had never known at ages they no longer remembered clearly. One letter described 7-year-old Michael refusing to leave a wounded bird beside the driveway until a veterinarian came. Grace brought that letter to dinner the following week. Michael groaned when she read it aloud. "My mother promised never to tell anyone." Grace smiled. Apparently, I was outside the statute of limitations. They laughed together for the first time without grief standing between every sentence. The relationship did not become instant sibling intimacy. Grace sometimes disappeared for days when the Hahn family's attention felt overwhelming. Michael learned not to interpret distance as rejection. He sent short messages without demands and allowed her to answer when she wanted. That lesson had Evelyn's fingerprints all over it, though neither of them said so. Evelyn returned fully to nursing after the professional review closed. She declined Michael's offer to fund any project connected directly to her employment because she did not want their growing relationship entangled with financial dependence. Instead, Grace invited Evelyn to join an independent patient dignity advisory initiative funded from her own inheritance allocation. Evelyn agreed only after legal and professional boundaries were reviewed in writing. Michael teased her about requiring paperwork for friendship. "Paperwork protects friendship from memory," she replied. He had learned enough not to argue. 3 months after the board meeting, Michael asked Evelyn to dinner at a small restaurant in Stamford. She asked whether it was business. No. Trust work. No. An apology. I hope I am finally running out of those. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Michael smiled. It is a date, if you want it to be. She made him wait long enough to remember that wanting an answer did not entitle him to immediate certainty. Yes, she said at last. It can be a date. Their relationship grew in the ordinary hours Michael once admitted he had failed to value. He learned to sit in Evelyn's kitchen without checking his phone whenever silence appeared. She learned that accepting help did not erase independence when she had actually been asked what help she wanted. They argued about work, family, travel, and whether Michael's expensive coffee tasted meaningfully better than the supermarket brand Evelyn preferred. None of those moments were extraordinary on their own. They mattered because after months of secrets and public conflict, 2 people were choosing reliability over rescue. 6 months after Sun Hee's death. Grace organized a private memorial at the Greenwich estate before the property was sold. She invited Michael, Elaine, Evelyn, several longtime household employees, and no reporters. Peter was invited too. He did not attend, but he sent a handwritten note asking Grace to keep one of their mother's letters for him until he was ready to read it. Grace did not promise forgiveness. She saved the letter anyway. In the garden, she tied a fresh blue ribbon around the branch of an old maple facing Sun Hee's bedroom window. Michael stood beside her, holding the original brass key. Elaine had returned it after the estate no longer needed the safe deposit box. "What should we do with this?" he asked. Grace looked at Evelyn. Evelyn shook her head. "It was never mine." Grace took the key and threaded it onto the ribbon. "For most of my life. I thought a locked door meant someone did not want me inside," she said. Michael touched the ribbon gently. "Mother used the key because she wanted someone to keep looking." Grace nodded. The symbol had changed. At first, the brass key represented secrecy, a hidden daughter. and a dying woman's fear that her sons would control what happened next. Now it represented the opposite evidence, preserved long enough for choice to return to the people who had been denied it. Elaine stood several feet away, wiping tears from beneath her glasses. Grace walked to her. "I am still angry with you," she said. "I know. I do not know whether I forgive you. I know that too. But my mother trusted you after you told her the truth." Elaine's voice broke. "She made me earn that trust for years." "Good." Grace held out one of the birthday cards. "Then you can start earning mine by telling me everything you remember." Elaine took the card with both hands. It was not forgiveness. It was a door left unlocked. Later. While everyone else moved toward the house for dinner, Michael remained beneath the maple with Evelyn. "I spent most of my life believing strength meant preventing bad things from happening," he said. "And now I think sometimes strength is staying when the bad thing has already happened and letting someone else choose what comes next." Evelyn leaned against him. "That is considerably less efficient. I have been told efficiency is not a personality." "Who told you that?" "My mother," repeatedly. They laughed. Michael reached for Evelyn's hand, then paused with the question visible in the gesture. She placed her hand in his. Across the garden. Grace stood beneath her mother's window, reading one last letter in the fading afternoon light. The letter had been written 27 years earlier and never delivered. Sun Hee had described a dream in which all three of her children were seated at the same table, arguing about something unimportant. She wrote that the dream hurt because ordinary family arguments were a luxury she had denied them before any of them could choose differently. Grace folded the letter and looked toward Michael. He was helping an elderly former housekeeper carry a chair toward the terrace while Evelyn held the door open. Grace smiled through tears. Swan Hee's dream had not come true the way she imagined. Peter was absent. The family company had survived only by accepting painful losses, and no revelation could restore 58 missing years. But the truth had done something secrecy never could. It had given the living people a chance to make choices that belonged to them. Grace walked toward the house, carrying the letter instead of leaving it at the grave. She was not entering the Han family as a secret, a scandal, an imposter, or an inheritance problem. She was entering as Sun Hee Han's daughter, on terms she had chosen for herself. And Evelyn Brooks, the nurse once dismissed as hired help, had kept the promise that made that choice possible. She had not rescued Grace, defeated Peter through power, or repaired a family with one heroic gesture. She had done something quieter and harder. She had protected facts until frightened people were finally forced to face them. For Michael, that changed the meaning of protection forever. For Grace, it changed a lifetime of anonymous birthday cards into evidence that she had been remembered, even when memory alone was not enough. For Elaine, truth became the beginning of accountability rather than the end of guilt. And for Peter, consequences began where excuses stopped, leaving open the possibility of change without demanding that anyone forgive him before they were ready. The blue ribbon moved in the evening wind, the brass key tapping softly against the maple branch. Once it had guarded a secret. Now it marked the place where a family finally stopped allowing silence to make its decisions.